Yo, welcome to the Noshotclockshow. I am Kmac.
I'm Miguel.
Yeah, man, we got a special guest. We got Prasad, the CEO of Relo Metrics in LA, and he's here to talk sponsorships and analytics. Hey, what's up, Jay? How you doing, bro?
Yeah, it's good to be here with you guys.
Cool.
I'll kick this off. I was very curious when I was scrolling through your timeline on Instagram and some of the other stuff that's on there. Really cool stuff, first and foremost, man. From a guy that has no idea what you do, who does it cater to? Does it cater more to the businesses looking for sponsors, or does it cater more towards the actual donors or sponsors, if you will?
Yeah, we wanted to build an ecosystem-wide approach. So as sports and all forms of live entertainment continue to grow, dominate culture, it dominates TV viewing, it's increasingly the most popular content across social media. There's a lot of interest from those who are creating the content themselves, meaning like the media companies who are producing content, or obviously teams and leagues. So from a sports standpoint, they're the ones who dominate the organization of all of these professional sports. But you also have the brands that are getting involved in sponsorship and brand integrations. And you often have agencies as layers that help execute all of these things. So we wanted to build measurement products, data products that help all parts of the market truly understand what is happening. So if you decide that you're going to be a jersey patch sponsor for the season, well, what did you get from that? How many times were you visible on TV? For how long? How quality was the exposure? Was it clear? Was it blurry? Was it often combined with other logo impacts? What did fans think about that sponsorship, especially when there's cool new things like naming rights for a stadium? Is the name resonating? Are more people searching for the name since you became the naming right sponsor of an arena, let's say? And then who's engaging with the content across social media? A lot of sports branded content includes partners. A lot of athlete and influencer content includes partners. Well, how much value is being generated from those posts that are happening on owned and operated posts, but also just in an ecosystem wide? Like, so we have an NBA ecosystem across all social platforms. So we help answer the question, what are the creative assets that are all being deployed out there? How are they organized? How are they performing? What's the value of them? What do fans think about it? What's the sentiment in relation to it? Pretty much an entire 360 about how this whole experience comes to market.
That's awesome. Come on, I'm gonna let you get the next question, but before I do, I think this is, man, this just immediately grabbed me because I run a basketball program and just sold another one. We partner with one of the biggest hospitals here in Orlando, Advent Health. We also partner with the Orlando Magic. And one of the things is impressions, right? So I think it's also a great way for us as the people that are being sponsored to be kind of accountable for what we are taking, right? As far as partnerships and sponsorships. I think this is really cool, man. And I could see it working for both parties. So yeah, real good stuff.
We've done some work with Advent Health and
Okay.
yeah, I know they've got some relationships with the Tampa Bay Lightning and other Florida related professional teams.
Right, for sure.
We got OKC and Indiana in the NBA Finals. Those are two smaller market teams, right? So how can mid-market teams use data to attract big sponsorship dollars and stuff, you know?
Yeah. So there's, I think, a couple of things to unpack about that. Well, the NBA, of course, is going through a transition right now where the big market teams do not dominate the league, and the superstars of the last 2 decades no longer dominate the league, right? So you've definitely got a change happening across the NBA, and this happens in a lot of sports. And sometimes it can be painful during these times, but one thing is clear: these younger stars are growing up social native, and they're very good across social media. So they end up attracting younger fans, which is always good for the sport. So those younger stars become ambassadors of what's going on with the youth and the younger fan bases that you need to grab. You don't have people, maybe, let's say, I think the average NBA fan is roughly 41 years old, which is actually pretty young for sports when you compare it to NFL and MLB. That being said, those teams and athletes that can build audiences across social media in more short forms of content, they could be highlights, they could be just takes from the locker room, something about getting to know these players better. That is part of the way everyone has to realize sports is going to be consumed. I believe that it's hard to grasp attention from younger people to sit down and watch a full 2.5 hours, right, of a game. And even basketball, which is shorter than, let's say, baseball, by the time you factor in the pregame show and the halftime show and the commercial breaks, you're still in 2 hour plus territory. In a TikTok generation where 15 seconds is a lot, how do you build sports fans for the future? So you have to engage in these ways. So yes, mid-market teams with younger players will not have the big TV audiences that the Celtics Warriors would have had, or the Lakers Celtics would have especially had.
The Dubs,
Warriors
baby.
small here.
Yeah.
And so, yes, will the NBA and the TV partners, TNT, etc., ABC, be a bit disappointed in some of the numbers? Maybe. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I think these are two super exciting teams, like the best defense and the best offense. That's a good pairing, right? So hopefully people can see past, hey, what city are they from? And maybe they don't have the national fan bases of a Warriors, the Celtics, the Lakers, etc. But you've got clearly the two best teams, one on offense, one on defense, and you have clearly much of the young talent here, including the MVP, right? All playing. So, we're all hoping for everyone, all of our partners, all our brand partners, the league itself, and all the teams, that this does end up being a really great finals. That said, brands are also seeing past just, hey, I got to buy the big market teams. Well, there's a lot of brands that are integrating with the NBA itself. The NBA is super innovative, right? I've had some really great conversations with the league at the league office. They are super advanced in how they think about technology, fan experiences, and marketing partnership experiences. And quite frankly, they're often innovating and ahead of the curve. So you see virtual graphics being put onto the court, and that can change from the playoffs to the finals. That can change from city to city, and that's happening in partnership with the broadcast partner and the league and its infrastructure. So you also now have a lot of virtual brand experiences happening during a broadcast. You could have a green screen in a pregame show with betting lines, for example, or fantasy. These are all things now that are done in partnership with a brand partner, as well as your TV or streaming partner. All this comes together in these really cool package deals. And ultimately, we find value in letting each part of that party know what exactly they're getting in return for it, and what are the areas that they could improve, right? A lot of times you can change the way things are positioned. You can change the camera time, the camera angles. There's a lot of things that can end up driving incremental value to that. And we find ourselves, right, in demand in being able to provide these types of insights.
Nice, man. Jay, tell us about your current role as CEO at Relo Metrics, and what excites you most about leading a company at the intersection of AI, sponsorships, and sports analytics.
Yeah, look, from a Venn diagram of what you could be working on right now, I couldn't be happier. I think I'm incredibly fortunate. I think everyone who works at Relo is incredibly fortunate. People in this industry right now, right? This is a golden age of sports, and it's a golden age of technology, and they're intersecting, which is fantastic. So my job is ultimately to be responsible for all good and bad that happens in the company. But that means on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm pretty operational. I like to be involved in all aspects of the business. So, we've got a great team all the way, from those who are on the ground talking to customers to those who are building all of these software applications. And we're located, I think, in 9 or 10 countries, where all of our employees are. So we're a global company. We have customers around the world. I think we're currently measuring 36 different sports. We're doing live music events now. So there's just a lot of things happening. So a lot of my time is spent really helping orchestrate how we go about things in terms of what we're building, how we're going to build it, who we're partnering to build it with. What do we deploy? How do we price it? How do we get it into the market? How do we service our customers? These are all things that, pretty much happen nonstop. And, when you're global, it starts at 5 a.m. and can go till midnight. So you got to love it. Otherwise, right, it can be a bit all consuming.
I wanted to switch gears into the field that we're in. We're obviously starting this podcast and having a lot of fun with it, but I'm sure other podcasters as well would like to know, what are brands looking for when they partner with a podcast?
I think brands, when it comes to podcasting, they're trying to align a voice and an audience, and how they can contextually be relevant into that podcast or into that programming. I've seen like brands just basically take on the naming rights of several already popular podcasts. So instead of a brand, which one option is a brand starts one. And it's like, okay, we got some executives that maybe have a voice. We'll put a studio in the office in San Francisco or Santa Monica, and we're going to do a podcast a week. The odds of that being super successful are pretty low, right? Because a company that's not a media company or a content company, what are the odds you're going to be good at creating compelling content that really grasps an audience, that has personalities on that really know how to connect with an audience? That's hard to do, right? Like, I don't know that I could really do that. I don't know that that's how I'm wired. I like to be guests on podcasts, but Should I have one? Probably not. So as a company, if I wanted to find partners, that's what I'd be looking for. What kind of stories do you tell? Who are the guests that you have? And then where are you guys catching on? Is it podcast and then video clips on YouTube? There's a lot of cool comments on YouTube. It's really starting to become cultural moments. And then old media starts to cite your new media. That's when I think you're starting to cross over, is that when your podcast and video clips from your podcast are being used on TV news, for example, or a newspaper's website, then it's like, okay, now you're kind of doing both things. You're like really digging in the new world of how to connect to younger audiences, but you've gotten the respect and audience scale to the fact that even legacy media has to include what you're talking about.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're starting off and we're a smaller podcast. We're starting to grow. This past month, we've been gaining some algorithm and stuff. What advice would you give smaller podcasts who are trying to break into the sponsorship game?
Yeah, getting your story together, right? So as you put together, your portfolio and your reels of highlights from the show, and being able to show that when you post stuff socially, you're starting to catch a little bit with audiences, you're getting retweets and reposts and all of those kinds of social media metrics, then you have a good narrative that you can tell. And then I think it's about doing some research on which brands would be endemic to what you're talking about. So obviously, if this is going to be a sports podcast, there's several brands who are endemic to sports, but every sportscast hits up those endemic brands. So the other strategy to do in conjunction with that would be based on the messaging and based on the guests. What are some other brands? Maybe it's regional, right? You talked about Advent Health. You're in Orlando. It could be regional sponsors that you get some regional listenership pop, and you start with local businesses that maybe are not endemic to sports.
Yeah, that's the other thing is we've partnered with a lot of local businesses. I think that it's tougher with the smaller businesses sometimes because they want instant value for what they're giving.
Yeah, I mean their timeline to get return on investment is shorter because they're not dealing with as big a budget. So I think it's about how your business model is structured with them and building out additional content with those partners, right? So outside of the podcast, even doing social posts, doing stuff in person, right? Community activation is a huge part of sports teams, right? People don't really realize how much of an impact a team has in its local community, right? It's not just about, getting good publicity. It's a part of the programming of any professional sports team, which is we're going to work with these local organizations in the community. And here are some of the things that we're going to help people with in our community, or here are some problems that we think we can help. And we're going to offer our players, our team, our venue. We're going to put all these things into a local market and drive community value. That attracts sponsors, right? Because then sponsors want to be associated with what's happening there. A healthcare company can only do so much. That's cool, right? But if you team up with the Orlando Magic, then you can make magic, right? And that's what I think is going to happen.
Awesome.
So now we're going to talk a little bit of your personal life, man. You went to the University of Wisconsin, the Badgers, right? So I want to ask you this: how was your time there? How did that shape your career in tech and media and AI too?
I think for me, it goes back to even a bit further on, like, if you really want to trace back, well, how did you get to this point? I grew up in the Milwaukee suburbs. I was originally born in Queens. My dad got a job with Miller Brewing back when Miller was only in one plant in the United States. And now they have, obviously breweries all over the place. That was actually kind of his job in corporate engineering, was to build that out. But growing up as a kid in the Milwaukee suburbs, at that point in time, Miller sponsored everything. So I got to go to every sporting event you could think of, right? Because Miller always had tickets, and they were good tickets. And sometimes when like the era of the luxury box came, be us kids in high school at a luxury box at the Bradley Center with the Bucks. This is pre Fiserv. I used to go to Bucks games when I was at the Mecca. I used to go to Brewers games when I was at County Stadium. Wow. And the Packers still played 4 games a year in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So my history with this goes way back. And I always felt like, wow, it's because Miller is a sponsor of all this. I get to be at all this stuff as a kid, and as a young kid who liked to play sports and, like a young son of immigrant kids, like that was an amazing experience for me. I played tennis as my main sport, but I also played basketball and baseball. So I was always playing 3 sports a year. And basically I could go see the professionals every year. And, that dominated my whole childhood is playing sports and going to watch sports. So that was always in my DNA. And then University of Wisconsin, fantastic school. It goes without saying, right? It's one of those special campuses. It's a huge sports school. And so that was a nice blend in. I was an early walk on the tennis team, then washed out. You kind of hit your ceiling. I was a bit scrawny back in those days. So I didn't quite have what it took to play D1 or anything like that. I mean, Kamal, you played receiver.
It's tough, man.
It's not lost on me.
Yeah.
And so, I studied business and information systems there. I always did internships. I actually did an internship for a couple years with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel because it started from my days as a 12-year-old with a paper route. And then I walked door to door selling the newspaper subscriptions. That taught me how to sell, but also it was exposure into media, right? And once again, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel had all kinds of events all summer that I got to be at. Sports, community, like my childhood was kind of within that. And then I ended up doing a year abroad at the London School of Economics and got deeper into international business and economics, and all that started me off in consulting, which was great. It's like boot camp for college grads, right? Where you get beat up a bit, you think you know what you're talking about, and then you get your first documents back. You've never seen more red ink in your life. Like partners just like, how stupid are you? Like, look at this document. This is terrible. So it's a good learning experience. And I decided a couple years into consulting that it wasn't for me. And I ended up just starting my first technology company when I was 24. And it was in the software space. It was like hosted software. And I always had it in me that I want to be in that intersection of technology and media. Sports was a huge part of my life. So it was like a behind my head thesis that was always running. And almost every job I've had has been leading up to this point. I mean, I was able to work at amazing companies along the way too. I was deeply involved with Yahoo Sports when Yahoo Sports was the biggest property, and it still is one of the biggest global sports properties in the world. So, just being able to be on the inside of how all these big technology platforms, sports, media companies, and probably about 12 years ago, I really gravitated towards measurement because measurement is neutral, right? So usually in any marketplace, someone's either buying stuff and someone's selling stuff, right? So buyers and sellers are trying to sell to each other. If you do measurement in the era of big data and AI, right? Everybody needs your stuff, right? And there's something very cool about being the center of an ecosystem and having a neutrality that allows you to keep scaling without a bias. And that's why I love measurement, and that's what we're doing here. And so it's all come together.
That's awesome. This is a loaded question, Jay, but man, we love success stories. Obviously, you're one yourself, and I'll shoot it to you simple. What is Jay's key to his success?
I think it's a combination of one, always be intellectually curious, right? You can never really stop learning. When you're a kid, you can annoy your parents by always asking why. But when you start getting answers to those whys and you can connect the whys in your head over time, it just creates this knowledge base that's based on experience and your own intuition and your own intellect. And that is really important. And then two, the value of who you associate with in your network over time. If you meet lots of people and you're good about keeping in touch with them and you always do favors for others, then people will always have, reverence for you and your relationship. And then those things compound over time, right? Knowledge and relationships compound like interest, right? People have often said that interest is one of the, biggest powers in the universe. Warren Buffett has said that compounding interest is, one of the true wonders of the universe. I think knowledge and relationships are the same. And every year that you do it and you keep doing that, things start to just seem easier. They're not easier. It's because you've earned your way to get to that point.
Wow. I love it, man.
Sounds good. So now we're going to get into some sports questions, just a few. So I know that you are a Big Ten guy, right? You're a big football guy, right? And so what do you think about the Pac-10, Pac-12 bringing over those teams to the Big Ten? Is that good for the newer conference?
I mean, look, college sports has become professionalized, right? It was inevitable. The conferences all realigned around getting the largest TV deal and having the largest TV footprint, meaning you're in the most states with the most homes. At the same time, you have the professionalization of college athletes, right? NIL and now revenue sharing. I know there's a lot of legislation and there's a lot of, it's a moving target. It's hard to keep up with on a day-to-day basis, but you have basically college sports becoming professionalized. So just like in any sport, scale matters. Just like in any business, ultimately scale matters. So the conferences that were strong subsumed the best schools from the conferences that ended up being weaker. And the Pac-10, the Pac-12, ton of history, but I don't think that they had the right mix when it came to their TV strategy. It didn't quite, hit in the main ways. And now you have basically super conferences in sport. And the Big Ten is the only truly national coast to coast conference. SEC is the other super conference, but it's still fairly regional. And so then, you had a lot of the big Pac-12 teams going into the Big Ten, but you also had some going into the ACC, right? The other schools that are also very high academically. And
Stanford,
then just,
right? Stanford.
Yeah, Stanford and Cal, right? And then, there's just Oregon State and Washington State, right? That are joining the WAC, right? I think something like
No,
that.
we are staying in the Pac-10 and taking teams from the
Okay, so it's a
Fresno State, San Diego State, all those state schools almost.
Yeah, so it's almost like reconstituting the Pac-12
Exactly.
with the next generation of schools. And you know what? Schools like Fresno State and San Diego State, they've had a lot of success.
Yes.
They can go toe to toe with the big guys, right? So I also think that that's also not a bad thing, right? If there's a new Pac-12 with schools that were once, I live here in San Diego County, and Aztecs are big here, right? I mean, they were in the national championship game for basketball, 2 years ago, right? And they're, they go back to when Harbaugh was the coach down here, right?
Yeah.
It's great to see that these schools that maybe were like considered small and on the sideline conferences, they're now the stage. Those other teams exited that stage, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC, and now there's new ones entering that stage. And they'll also now get a chance to grow their revenue.
True.
And grow the exposure of their athletes in the same way that those other schools did. So the merry-go-round always spins.
For sure.
That's true.
All right, Jay, we're getting into our top 5 segment. This is what we always bring to our guests, man. And this is an exciting one because I'm interested in to hear who yours are. And this is top 5 athletes from the University of Wisconsin.
Ooh, man, they got some athletes. Got some players.
Yeah, I mean, just going there, huh? I mean, look, I think, if we start with running back university, right? You've got Ron Dane, right? Heisman winner, all-time leader. I mean, you've got Jonathan Taylor, right? Been a little bit injured, but man, like what an electric player in college. And then his first couple years in Indy. Melvin Gordon, right? Probably the most underappreciated at that time when running backs couldn't get the nod with the Heisman. You got to look at, you don't really consider usually Wisconsin as an NBA factory, but Michael Finley is kind of
there you go.
Yeah.
Still,
Mike Finley was nice back then.
Mavs, right? So I think you gotta put Finley on there, and then I think there is I would have to say you got to go with Frank the Tank, Frank Kaminsky, right?
Kaminsky, yeah, man, he was nice.
One of the all-time best college basketball players all around. The big NBA is now dominated by big men who can dribble, pass, and shoot. Right. That was Kaminsky back in 2014.
Yeah, he was. What about a guy named Devin Harris?
That was going to be right before I said Frank. I was about to say Devin Harris.
Nice point guard. Hey, man, he was nice.
He was as smooth gets. Just watching a game with Devin Harris in it, you're like, wow, what a puppet master this guy is, right? Yeah. Everything that he did just looks so effortless. Wonderful era for those Badger teams too.
Yeah. So we got one last question that we always ask our guests. Who your GOAT? LeBron, MJ, or Kobe, or could be Spicy Curry. Who would you pick?
I may have a slight bias in the fact that there's been so much reflection since the passing of Kobe, but I think there's like a special mind under Kobe that was unique. And also him and MJ are probably the most fierce competitors, right? That took losing or not being excellent so personally. It can come out in maybe not so positive ways. But yeah, I think it's Kobe. And, and I even think back to just having the chance to have actually seen him a couple times. So his daughter played basketball with my niece in Orange County. And so he was at this basketball center a couple times. And, it was just always really great to everyone around. Just not the guy, you might see on the sideline, but just like a very gentle community character. It was super sad, when that tragedy happened. But I think all the things that I've read and seen in sort of tribute to him have got to put him up right there.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, Jay, thank you, brother, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You want to share anything, man? You want to share your handles, your website, your company website? Anything?
Yeah, we're relometrics.com. I'm Jay Prasad. We have a lot of cool things going on. We're really focused right now on helping new sports get themselves into the spotlight a bit and get marketer attention. We've been doing that with women's sports for the last couple of years. That stuff is now all taking off. So we really also try to create data that helps create new opportunities as well. You can get dominated by the big leagues, but there's also a lot of excitement and a lot of interest in the new stuff as well. So that's a place where you're going to continue to see focus from us.
All right, man.
Awesome,
cool, brother. Yeah, man. This is
Thank you guys.
No Shot Clock. I'm Kmac.
And I'm Muggz. Appreciate it.
Good to see you guys.